Hello and welcome to the Brown Playbook. Today we ask the question, is the India-Pakistan rivalry in cricket the biggest in sport? It's definitely the biggest story that's come out of Indian and Pakistani sports and just South Asian sports overall, but I'll put the question straight to you, mate.
To be honest, I was thinking about all the other rivalries, and I think I personally think it is due to obviously one being one country before and then being split up, but two, all the tensions around the game of cricket and the game of sport. Because I was thinking of other ones. You've obviously got a lot of clubs. So, for example, El Clasico, Real Madrid, Barcelona, obviously Arsenal, Tottenham, all the football ones. But then obviously you can't relate a club rivalry compared to like an international rivalry. Yeah. And then I was thinking, okay, cool, let's think about rugby, for example. We've got England, Scotland, Australia v New Zealand. But I think none of them really... and obviously you've got the Ashes as well, to be fair. But for me, I think there are some ones that are close. I'm not going to say like it's
Argentina, Brazil in football.
Exactly.
That's probably
so. I think there are other good rivalries as well. But I think this one, to be honest, it just takes it for me. Like just the magnitude of it, the fact it was India, Pakistan, obviously were one country before, split up 94-7 due to the partition. And then a lot of bloodshed, political tension, social tension around it. And almost like the danger around it is that it's more high stakes, right? Especially for people who have a lot more of like a sentimental feeling and emotion. It's a lot more emotional, right? I feel. So I would say, I think it is the biggest rivalry. What do you think?
I do agree. I want to break it down a bit more because I always try to play devil's advocate with myself whenever I make like a big claim like that. Right? So I'd say what makes a big rivalry is probably history, like the level of tension, like the reason behind why the rivalry exists, which I guess ties in with history a lot. But I don't think and there'll probably be loads more factors as well, but I don't think if you add all those up, there's any other rivalry that quite matches this one, just because it's a conflict that still hasn't been resolved. Both these countries use this sport as like political power in a lot of ways, and they have done over the years.
Yeah.
So it's bigger than just the sport in this one, which it normally always is, like, with FIFA and football. Like, as I've gotten older, I've realized how politicized sport is, but I never quite felt that it was quite high stakes and quite as tense as the India-Pakistan rivalry. And then you look at the history of both of their cricketing journeys, and it just makes like such a good spectacle whenever they play now.
Yeah, well, such a good spectacle that a Netflix documentary just came out.
There you go, mate. There you go. Honestly,
the greatest rivalry, India-Pakistan.
Yeah, check it out.
Hit me, mate. What did you think of it? Go on.
I wish there was more. I do wish there was more, but from what they showed, I think it did a decent job of encapsulating how tense it is.
Yeah, going back to your question, do you think it did show that is the biggest rivalry?
Yeah, I think so. Because even that snippet, so in the documentary, right, they really just looked at a couple of major points in history, right? Yeah. So there was a 2004 series and what happened there. And basically...
The 99 one.
Yeah, the 99 one before that, sorry, and then like 2007 to 8.
Exactly.
So there was like 3 different points in time where they looked at. This rivalry goes back so much longer than that, even in just a cricketing sense, not just in history. So there's a lot more to it, I felt, and I wish that like we saw it from the start to where it is now, rather than just those snippets in time. But what they did show, I think they did a good job with it. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I think, well obviously so the 99 one was Pakistan coming to India. And then the 2004 one was obviously India touring Pakistan. So I understood why they did that kind of timeline. But as you said, they did it from basically, late 90s to, 2008. But obviously it could be a lot longer. Even to more in our generation, it could have been up to literally about 2 years ago till like, as you said, way before. But I get that obviously 50 years is a lot to cover. So they've kind of just picked a couple of points and highlighted it. I enjoyed it, to be honest.
Yeah,
I did think that obviously if you guys have watched it, there's like Shoaib Akhtar, Virender Sehwag kind of play leading roles in the narratives, like sharing stories obviously about being in the teams and playing away and all of those things. But I wish if there was more legends, like Sachin Tendulkar was involved, Rahul Dravid was involved, maybe Wasim Akram or a couple of the others. I know they were there a little bit,
snippets, right?
Maybe
right? Like their old clips.
If you had about a couple more of the main players in those teams, really maybe like 5 from each side, really giving like major accounts of what they thought. Obviously, it was only 3 episodes, but say it was like a 10-episode season, means that obviously you could make the time frame a bit longer with more legends. I think that would have given like a more insightful, like you could go into basically everything more in terms of the context behind it. Why is it such rivals and the cricketing context? If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No, I was saying that I think we say that because we followed cricket a lot and we're like fans of the sport and like, you know, we care about the whole picture. But I guess outside of India and Pakistan and maybe like, you know, just the cricketing world, not many people know about this rivalry, I don't think. Like,
yeah, it was a good.
Do you know what I mean?
I agree
so I think as an intro to new markets, it is good for that exposure because it did cover like the golden age of that rivalry because both teams were like doing so well. Like India's batsmen were unbelievable. Their lineup from 1 to 7 was, you know, every single one of those players is a legend now. And the Pakistani bowling lineup was, you know, highlighted. They were really good. So I understand why that is like, you know, if you're going to pick a snippet of their whole history, the ones they picked would be the ones. And I guess that's probably what it was intended to do. Right.
No, I agree with you. To be fair, it does make a lot of sense, especially if you're like trying to expand into new markets or, for example, you follow cricket, but maybe you're not such an invested fan. And I do think it's the more storytelling aspect rather than just like stats and wickets and runs helps because obviously you get someone invested into the rivalry by the stories. Yeah. So I agree with you. But then also I think what was key was, I think that the Pakistani bowlers with the Indian batters is always going to be a feature. But I found it funny when they related it to like the personalities.
Yeah.
Like Pakistan were like the aggressors.
Yeah.
But then the way Indian batsmen bat, like leaving, being very cautious and very safe, obviously until like Sehwag kind of came in.
Yeah.
And even Tendulkar to a way. But like Gaviskar, and they were talking about those guys, how like it was almost reflected the personalities.
Did you know about that? Because I know you've not like probably looked into, you know, the rivalry and just cricket in general that far back. Whereas I probably have.
I remember in that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like, you know, what did you learn about that side of it? And what do you agree with that? Do you think that that's kind of like true, like properly reflective?
I think it is. For me, the thing is, when I think about India now, or India more in general, when it comes to sport, I do see us as kind of being the aggressors. Obviously, that kind of changed now. Yeah. So when I look back at it then, I can imagine it, but I didn't think it would be like we were branding as that. If you know what I mean? I thought it would be more like a balance in a team, but then certain people would be like that, but certain people would be like the aggressors. Yeah. Kind of not where our whole team was kind of a bit like that, which is kind of, I feel like, what the documentary told us, that like we were all very like that.
Yeah. No, I hear that. What really kind of like surprised me is because I knew all of these series and like the context of them in the wider story of India and Pakistan, but you know, I didn't know some specifics. Yeah. So when they broke down the lineup from 1 to 7 for India, it was who? Sehwag and Ganguly opening. Who was it at 3? Dravid at 3, Tendulkar at 4. And then, you know, there was a few like Mohammad Kaif, Yuvraj Singh, VVS Lakshman. And there were a couple other batsmen as well who they could like interchange. And I looked at like the lineups and the results of the series on ESPN before doing this. The level of depth was unbelievable and they were all consistent. I thought that's the biggest difference probably between modern cricket and back then, where batsmen were prided on being consistent rather than being just aggressive. Yeah. That's just my take on like how cricket's changed now.
Also, one thing I learned from the Netflix series, and we can kind of review it in a bit, was I actually didn't know that India had only won one single match in the previous 2 World Cups before winning the 1983 World Cup. And that was obviously quite pivotal to this generation we've been talking about now.
Can I give context to this just before?
Yeah, go on.
So, like, I think between India and Pakistan, it's to this day still a pretty even rivalry. I know that India's definitely like better right now, but over the years, they've been quite even in many ways. So, for example, India wins the World Cup in 83. 9 years later, Pakistan wins in 92. In the head-to-head record, Pakistan is beating us in both Test matches and ODIs, probably because we haven't played them much since 2008 because of the terrorist attacks. But still, like the fact that up until 2008, we had strong teams back then as well, and their head-to-head record was, I think it's like 73 to 50 something in ODIs.
But how long does that date back then?
Oh, from the start because there's a record for every single.
But when is the start though? Like how far?
Back probably in the 50s, mate.
Oh, wow.
So from there to 2008, they would have played 120 ODIs. So no, not the 50s. That would have been test because they didn't play ODIs until probably the 80s, no 70s and 80s, right? That's when the World Cup.
But basically, what I'm trying to say is, it was literally as soon as we both got independence, basically. If you know what I mean, very close after partition, basically.
Yes,
that we started playing
in test. And then ODI. But the context was, whilst India have more silverware they have 2 World Cups, they have 2 ODI World Cups and 2 T20 World Cups. Pakistan have 1 of each. I think they have, I don't know how many Champions trophies, but I know Pakistan have at least 1 and India have at least 2.
Yeah.
But I don't remember that. I just remember that Pakistan win because that one hurt me. I can't lie. The one in 2017. But do you see what I mean? If India's winning in one thing, Pakistan's winning in the other. And that's been the case the whole time. And it fully encapsulated that in that Netflix documentary in that 2004 series. Where, India wins the first game, Pakistan win the next 2, and then India win the next 2. And it's always been quite well matched, which makes this rivalry that much better, that both teams have always been really, really good. Or if they're having a little phase, there'll still be an upset every now and then. When they beat us in 2017, they had no reason to beat us. Their team was shambolic compared to ours on paper, but they did it anyway. And I think that's what makes it really good in terms of quality of cricket. I love that about it. No, but you were saying about 83 World Cup.
No, I was just saying that obviously the fact that we had only won 1 game in 2 World Cups before,
that's mad,
get to the final in 1983, and at this point, obviously, our generation sees it as India being a cricketing nation. Anyone who's from India loves cricket. It's in their DNA. It's a religion. All of that. But the fact that actually even too long ago, that is why the fact that. In 1983, we get to the final. Kapil Dev's leading India. We are then facing West Indies, who are also 2-time champions, by the way. So we're complete underdogs in the final. We basically have no right or not much chance of winning it. End up winning it, and I think people need to understand that that's one of the major causes of inspiring another generation 100%. And really fueling India to love cricket, because obviously what comes is heroes come from that team, aka Kapil Dev and others, and other people then want to inspire to be those heroes for India. And then not even that is that everyone starts taking cricket more seriously, 100%. Whether it's a career, whether now instead of just being a hobby to be oh, the national team aren't good at it. Why aren't you? Why are you playing cricket? All of a sudden, oh my God, you should definitely take cricket as a hobby because we're the world champions.
Same thing happened with Pakistan as well. So I don't know if you know the story, but was it them that in the group stages, I think it was a rain called off match being the reason why they went through to the knockouts. So they were on the verge of getting knocked out
for their World Cup win in
1992.
Oh wow!
When Imran Khan was leading the team, they had really good bowlers then as well. But I guess it was their batting as well then.
Well, that's another thing. For example, they didn't.
But how epic was that story as well? That from nearly being knocked out to winning the World Cup, that's just as much of a turnaround as India's in '83. And the same kind of impact was had in Pakistan because the next 10 years they were unbelievable.
So this is exactly what we were seeing earlier. This Netflix documentary did not document that. So there's more stories that need to be. That's one of the things that. Probably while we're reviewing, while we're talking about this rivalry, but also reviewing the Netflix documentary, is kind of one thing that I think it should have been better. Well, we mentioned time frame, but for example, that story is a perfect reason why the time frame should have been longer. So I do think that's key. But I love the little anecdotes that they did share. For example, the Shoaib Akhtar one with him needing to get onto a bus to Lahore, which is 10 hours away,
unbelievable.
And couldn't afford
those individual stories are crazy, bro. Can you imagine going to a cricket trial, holding onto a ladder at the back of a bus?
For 10 hours.
10 hours. That's crazy.
At least the bus driver didn't say completely no. The bus driver said that you don't have keys to go on his car, just get on the ladder. The back will take you. You know what I mean? The bus driver said no. But then also Virender Sehwag, the fact that his parents were he basically got lectured when he said, a coach obviously told him, you're good at cricket, maybe you should pursue this.
He got into it quite late, one thing I noticed. Well, just because you were talking about the start of his journey, I thought I'd just step in. That I was surprised. So he said he got into it after his 10th standard exams, right? You're 15 then. that surprised me a bit because normally you got to be in the
that's probably when he started. When I mean get into it, is obviously he was playing.
Well, representative cricket. I thought I assumed that's probably what it was.
Yeah,
at 15.
I think.
But anyways, go on.
But I know what you mean though, and the fact that a coach has told him at 15. Usually nowadays we like clock a young prodigy at 8 or 9. Yeah. So. Yeah, and the fact that his parents were very basically, even though a coach had told him he's really good, and he was representing India, and obviously went on to score loads of runs at under 19s, and obviously in the first in the international team. It does feel like, they put that onus still on education, but they said, you can play cricket as long as you're in education, which is mad to think about for someone that good.
Like Virender Sehwag. Can't imagine him doing anything other than cricket, if I'm being honest.
But he had a lovely little main role in this.
Oh, yeah. honestly, bro. It was all about him and Shoaib.
Yeah,
about him and Shoaib.
That's what I mean. But like for example, putting on the bit of knowledge where obviously in Multan in 2004, that test where he got 300, the first obviously Indian player to do it. But then they didn't mention that in that knock before we declared. The same one, obviously, he got 300 with. He had a sick partnership with Sachin Tendulkar, who got 194 not out. So those little things, I feel like it could have added a little bit. But fair, guess what? He's in the Netflix doc. Tendulkar's not. So.
No, that's mad. The emphasis that he put on himself when he was describing himself as the Sultan of Multan. I was like, he loves it. He loves it. But fair enough. If you go to Pakistan, beat them in their backyard for the first time in history, and get 300 while you're doing it, you probably deserve it. It's fair enough.
but we should talk about more, because obviously it talks about it a lot, is the stuff surrounding especially India going to Pakistan in 2004.
Yes.
Because obviously, first of all, when the BCCI declared it, there was huge uproar, and there was a lot of yes, we're going, no, we're not going, yes, we're going, no, we're not going, for reasons that you can delve into more deeply. But let's just start with security and heightened political tension.
No, literally just that. It's everyone knows about the war that's going on. On top of that, there's I don't know how well to word this, but accusations that Pakistan is involved, like the nation of Pakistan is involved in terrorist activity and all of that stuff. So it just heightens security tensions when it comes to any foreign tours between the two nations. And so that particular series is probably some of my earliest memories in life, to be honest, because I was like 4 or 5 years old in India. And I remember seeing the celebrations of it. Obviously the tension got highlighted in this Netflix doc, which I didn't really know about. I just remember the family celebrating or getting sad whenever we had a loss, but I do remember it weirdly. But yeah, the context that this put regarding the political tensions was quite good. I think that was quite informative. It was almost like a bit of a political doc as much of a sporting one, really. Because so after they decided to go there, they, as you said, were umming and ahhing, but it also meant that the hosting nation, Pakistan, had to go out of their way to really make it hospitable. So when the Indian team landed, it really shocked me that, so the airport was empty. The road from their airport to the hotel was empty. The airport wasn't. The airport had quite a few people in it. Just
there was loads of security. But the fact that the roads were even empty so that the Indian team could get to the hotel as quick as they could. Obviously. No, it was really, it was good to see that. But what got me was when the tour was, before they got there, when the tour was first announced, with the BCCI headquarters in Mumbai getting trashed, and also I don't know what Indian ground it was or what pitch it was, but Indian pitch obviously got dug out by Indian fans, because long story short,
was the 99 one, right? When Pakistan were coming to India in 99.
But then when was the BCCI?
The BCCI one was the other one, I think.
Okay.
So in 99, when Pakistan were coming to India, it might have been both, really. There were probably backlash in both, but they highlighted.
What was crazy to me was the fact, even the backlash is obviously a constant in both, but the fact that the Indian fans or the Pakistani fans went so far due to this, if you know what I mean. Like digging up a cricket pitch when a fixture gets announced is a bit mad, or trashing the. I can't imagine. Well, obviously the rivalry is not intense, but we obviously live in England. We going to the ECB headquarters and just trashing it up.
Just go into the Oval and be like, no, I just don't want to see the lads play Australia. I'm not having it.
Exactly. Like, so that is crazy to think, right? Like,
I know.
And I knew.
I guess it surprises me slightly less though, just because like I spent enough time in India, so a total of 10 years, from 0 to 6 and then 15 to 18. And then just other little times where I've gone for longer than just a holiday.
Yeah.
There was, this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but there was just one time where the Prime Minister decided that certain banknotes just weren't going to happen anymore.
Man like modes.
Right? Man like modes.
Man like.
And then on the way back home, on the day it got announced, I'm just seeing buses being burned, people rioting on the streets. There's parts of the city which are like locked off. And me, like a donut, was just like, I had my earphones on my motorbike going back home. So I guess that kind of, I just know that Indians, and probably the rest of South Asia as well, have massive uproar whenever certain political things happen that they don't agree with.
Yeah.
Like there's sort of protests and stuff here, but it's just a different level there. People, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to see it, will take action probably more than they need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that made me chuckle rather than like surprise me. I was like, yeah, of course they did that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it's just. But the good thing was, which I really rated about the documentary, is that obviously the athletes in there, all the legendary figures, were very complimentary about the other nations.
Yes,
which is exactly what you want.
It's needed, isn't it?
Ganguli said it was like what was it, a month and a half of Diwali while they toured in 2004.
I love that part of it when they were reminiscing on that tour.
Yeah,
they were like, we were just out at late nights, sneaking out the hotel.
Show took them out
to the house. Yeah,
so that made me feel good how they highlighted that, because obviously we can go into generations and how we learnt about the rivalry in families. But for me, for example, obviously now, especially being UK British, I just want all South Asians to do well.
Yeah.
But you learn, and we'll get into this from an early age, that we are rivals, basically, India and Pakistan. And we can both say how 100%. We kind of learn, or that got drilled into us to a certain extent. Yeah. But I'm just, very glad that they highlighted that they both had a good experience, because as we say, they talk about a lot that cricket's being a unifier, like a bridge between the two nations. Because
I like that narrative.
Especially early on when it's like, okay, well, how do we really sort out the relationship? Let's put a cricket picture on.
get a series going. Do you know what I mean? Get the boys over. We'll have a kickabout. We'll have a knockabout and just chill.
And another thing is obviously
everyone will be happy.
putting the fans together. Yeah. Because that was one thing I learned, which I actually didn't know, is when India went over to Pakistan in 2004, it documented cricket visas. So I remember it said that basically you got a cricket visa to go over to Pakistan, because a lot of families had long lost relatives because they'd been on different sides of the border, therefore couldn't see each other. Okay, obviously, if you had family now in Pakistan, due to the political tensions, if I lived in India and you live in Pakistan, we wouldn't be able to see each other.
No.
So I rated how they documented it, that series brought a lot of, forget cricket in that sense, the cricket brought a lot of other families
100%.
Together.
Yeah.
Which was good when they said something like, I think the stat was like 55,000.
The biggest since the partition. So in the partition when
crazy.
Millions died doing that cross. And obviously you don't want to have that much migration since then. When this 2004 series was the first time when that many people crossed that border, which is really significant.
Yeah, that was so nice.
That whole series, I was just glad it was like a celebration for how cricket was the unifier. That whole series was like, there was intense rivalry on the pitch where it should be. Exactly. And everyone else was just like, encapsulated by the story of it, the drama, but it was all to do with cricket.
So one thing which really intrigued me is a question that came up to my head when I was watching the documentary is, cool. Obviously we're both Indian, but how do you know, or when's your first memory where someone in the family or you kind of recognize, India and Pakistan are rivals? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I remember it very clearly. It was during that series, 2004, because I probably wouldn't have remembered it was 2004 till I watched this doc, but I just remembered seeing an India-Pakistan series in a society cinema room before I moved to the UK. So in a housing society, in like a basement, they had this massive projector where they were playing the match and everyone was there.
Yeah, it's like a common room in a way where everyone from the society who lives in the neighbourhood comes and watches the match.
Exactly. And in that, there was this one guy who was just taking the piss in hindsight. And he was just like Pakistan's Zindabad.
Yeah.
And
for anyone that doesn't know what that means, it means long live Pakistan.
Yeah. And my dad was like, oh, some idiots. Because he's like, why is he supporting Pakistan when we're living in Gujarat in India? Like, why is he doing that? Why is he trying to cause an uproar? That was the first memory I had where I was like, oh, why? Like, what's the problem here? Because I was 4. So, I mean, wasn't going to have much of a deeper thought than that.
Clocked onto that.
Yeah, no, I remember that memory very well because then my dad was like, yeah, don't be like that guy.
Yeah.
And then over time, obviously, like you have those conversations. And to be honest, in my house, it was always through cricket because when I was younger and I was moving, like I have a lot of memories from when I was moving just because there was so much change. And like I just have lots of vivid memories. We'd speak about this kind of stuff whenever India and Pakistan played, literally. And they'd tell me the story. So one thing that is really drilled into me was in 2001. This isn't strictly to do with Pakistan, but it's to do with like Muslims, which is the main reason there's a Pakistan in the first place.
Yeah.
The Muslim-Hindu divide in India is a similar kind of problem to the India-Pakistan divide. And in 2001, I don't know if you know this.
And that still goes, sorry, just quickly, that still is completely goes in today with obviously we know Hindu and Muslim marriages aren't really approved. So that's still very influential in today's society.
Absolutely. But in 2001, there were major riots in Gujarat between Hindus and Muslims. And that played a big part of like sort of forming my whole family's mentality because we're historically very kind of like, very Hindu. And the problem then for those riots to be caused was like both communities were kind of hurting the other's gurus. So there was an incident where a bunch of Muslim people burned a train of Hindu swamis.
Yeah.
And that caused an absolute riot in Ahmedabad, where there is a major Muslim, not majority, but there is a significant Muslim population among the Hindus. And those riots basically live in the memory of anyone who was alive to see them then. So since then, anything to do with...
Do you know what the Hindus did back, in retaliation?
Oh, no, because they wouldn't have told me those stories.
Yeah.
But they definitely...
And that's a great point to raise, right? Which is also...
But I know for a fact they did it, because I looked into it a bit, but I don't remember it the way like my parents' stories were drilled into me. Yeah. I know they did it, so I have a nuanced view on it. Of course, there's a deeper side to the story than, the Muslims were bad. But in my house, because of that incident where we were, anything to do with Hindus and Muslims, India and Pakistan revolves around that. Just never forget kind of thing. So that was like, that's why it was drilled into me basically. But what about you?
Interesting. Well, mine I think is just from grandparents, to be honest, as in obviously Punjabi family. Punjab is obviously where the partition border is. That there's you can be Indian Punjabi and you can be Pakistani Punjabi.
Of course.
And I think just obviously my grandparents are of the generation where it happened, being in Punjab. So it's quite sensitive because seeing all the bloodshed, the tears, your friends, your relatives, your family, that all of a sudden a line is drawn and they're on the other side of a border. You lose close friends, close family. You may have even lost really close relatives, passed away, your home. You've been completely displaced. So it's a pretty emotional time. So I think from early on, obviously with my grandparents and vice versa, I think either way, both, whether you're Pakistani Punjabi or Indian Punjabi, just that environment that you grew up in, that hostile environment that is only going to kind of bring bad memories, is that they obviously grew up with it and there's a lot of tension and baggage that comes with it. So when your grandparents obviously tell you stories about that time in their lives, you kind of understand, okay, where the rivalry, that almost hatred kind of, not hatred, but why they dislike that time, but also why we are rivals and how it comes from that. More so because if you actually talk about people that lived before the partition and before obviously the British Empire kind of, well, obviously when it wasn't Hindustan and became India and Pakistan, everyone got on really well. When you speak to a lot of older generation in the borders, no one really says, "Oh, we didn't get on with them," or because it was all one country. People just lived in the city they were from. Like it wasn't a I'm Indian, I'm Pakistani. It's I'm from here. Yeah.
Right? Like most people don't know that a bigger part of Punjab is in Pakistan
than in India. Yeah, exactly.
So like of course, like I know Punjab was affected probably the most, like as a region of India. It was definitely affected the most in that partition because it was literally drawn down the middle.
Exactly.
But Punjab was even affected by borders drawn in India after. So like between like Haryana and Punjab, that kind of thing. Like these kind of disputes.
And it's still always going to be there with the Jammu Kashmir. Like Kashmir is just above. No, Jammu is just above Amritsar, right? So,
so far.
So So that's kind of going back to your question. That's kind of where you kind of get drilled into. Okay, how come we're rivals? Yeah, that's really the case. So,
but because I grew up here, I was able to have conversations with my parents about it. To like almost, they were never like racist with it, which I'm very proud of them for, because they were just cautious. They were like, just in case. And I'm like, I get where that comes from, but at the same time, we got to let it go now. So those are the kind of conversations we'd have when I was growing up, and cricket helped with it a lot. Do you know what I mean? Or like when you see a sick cricket match between the two countries, and like, even if your team loses, it's like, what a spectacle that was. All this stuff that we're beefing about, is it that deep? Do you know what I mean? Let's leave the rivalry on the pitch kind of thing. But I guess I grew up playing sport and they did.
That's what I mean. That's a nuanced one because that's a great mentality to, and I believe is the correct mentality to move forward. But then it's like, it's very easy for us to tell 100%. The older generation, just leave it behind, mate. When I'm
definitely empathetic. I'm definitely more empathetic now than I was, because like when you grow up here, you just get told, and I took it more seriously than I realized a lot of people around me, where everyone should be equal. Do you know what I mean? I really took that to heart. I thought that was a really good thing about this country. And it's a bit idealistic for people who haven't lived in like a prospering country their whole life. Problems go deeper than that. Like, if you're from India, having been born in the 1970s, gone through the things that my parents did. When I was younger, I was like, oh, you got to let that go. But now I understand, well, look, I do think you still need to let it go, but don't get me wrong, I get why you are the way you are. But we need to find a middle ground. I guess that's what this is all about. And with the cricket thing, to like, pull it back into it. They tried to find a middle ground, and they did many times. The 99, the 2004 was an example, and the biggest example was the IPL. So the context is the first ever T20 World Cup, right? A format of cricket which was made up as a joke, right? Because cricket's meant to be a long game. Who knows why, but that's how it was. It's traditional. T20 comes along. The first T20 World Cup comes along in 2007, and guess who's in the final? India and Pakistan, right? India don't score that many runs. Pakistan are still struggling initially, but right at the end, what seemingly a hero called Misbah-ul-Haq steps up, gets a 50, nearly gets them in the last over. They don't need that many runs, but they're 9 down. He takes a scoop, right? He gets on one knee and like tries to play a very cheeky shot, especially for that generation, and he gets caught, and India win the first ever T20 World Cup. I see a lot of sporting videos on YouTube about like butterfly effects, and that is probably the craziest butterfly effect of how this joke of a T20 format led to India's World Cup win and then the IPL. And the IPL loads of potential for solving this kind of dispute between the countries, and especially from a cricketing sense, because initially Pakistani players were allowed to play in the IPL, and in the first edition, and the Netflix, it was amazing.
And the Netflix series does cover it very well. Actually.
Absolutely, yeah. It's again, I do wish that it was slightly longer, but I was very happy it touched on it. I think it was for only 15-ish minutes, but it gives you an idea of what it is, and like all while showing you how it was basically through images. Like, if you watch the last 15 minutes of the documentary, you do get a good idea of it.
So talk me through, first of all, how the IPL came about, and second of all, that obviously Pakistani players were allowed to play, and obviously now in this current day are not allowed to play.
So same way in '83, India win the World Cup, there's a craze about cricket in India, right? 2007, they win. That's the first World Cup I think they win since, but it's a different format, so it's a different trophy. But that format starts becoming a huge topic of interest in the nation. There's demand for more cricket, more entertaining cricket, fast-paced. Basically, cricket was heading in a direction...
More fours, more sixes, more entertainment.
It's more entertainment, because anyone who doesn't follow cricket would say about it that it's a bit boring. It's slow and long. It takes up your whole day. T20 comes along, and then it's, compared to before, you can digest it in 3 to 4 hours.
4.5 hours,
So it's much more digestible, and what you're seeing is like many more events, right? In cricket, every ball is an event.
Comparable to other sports now. Sometimes it's not as foreign as before.
Exactly.
It's now a lot more digestible to the viewer, to the consumer, and you can actually afford to sit 2-3 hours if you want to watch it, right? Like let's be honest, the amount of people that are going to sit for a whole test match is minimal. So you're 100%. Increasing your audience massively by making a shorter form of the game.
And you're increasing it further by mixing players from all over the world into these look like all-star teams. Yeah. So instead of, in cricket traditionally, it's just like the international game is the most important. Really, I don't know if it is anymore. And this was the start of it because these franchises were able to have squads of players, which they can choose from, which is the same as international, but 7 domestic players and 4 international players. And that meant that Indians and Pakistanis were playing together. I think in that first series, I don't know if did Ganguly ever play in the IPL? If he did, he would have played for KKR.
But Shoaib
Akhtar would have played with him. KKR. But even if he wasn't with him, I know Ganguly's involved with KKR in general because he's from that city. So the fact that even if that's not an example of a pair that played together who were formerly rivals, there were loads of rivals who are now sharing dressing rooms, and like the culture of world cricket's changing. All while everyone's making more money, the game of cricket's getting more views, and it kind of looks like nothing can really go wrong.
It's crazy.
Everything's getting improved.
Crazy if you think about it. We saw all the security concerns, and we've already mentioned it. That was literally in 2004, and then obviously 4 years later, in 2008, the IPL came. That's a pretty quick acceleration from security concerns to, oh my God, they're playing in the same team, compared to obviously as we talked about before and how big the tension was. So I think that was like a huge, obviously we're going to talk about what happened, but a huge step in the right direction. The fact that they were even in the same dressing room, because they couldn't even share a pitch before. Yeah. Or even India didn't even tour Pakistan until 2004. They hadn't been to Pakistan for 15 years. So 15 years to then playing to all of... 15 years of not playing to then playing to all... Then another 4 years sharing a dressing room. It was quite mad.
No, it was a very quick change, and it was all heading in the right direction. And to be fair, one thing they didn't point out, since that year, 2007, when they did share the dressing rooms, and like the culture of cricket just became a bit more global, like the same kind of culture across different countries. So there wasn't as much beef between the English and the Australians. There wasn't as much beef between the Indians and the Pakistanis. And that stayed, to be fair. Since then, I don't think the matches themselves have been quite as heated between the players. And the players have a lot more respect for each other. Whereas my dad used to tell me stories of particularly the Pakistani coach from the documentary, Javed Miandad.
Yeah.
My dad was like, he was an absolute shithouse. My dad hated him with a passion, genuinely. He was like, this guy took the piss every single time. Sometimes with his performances, but just generally as a bloke. He just didn't like him.
But that's what you kind of do when you're rivals.
I like that in sport. I'm not complaining about that. But my point is probably the things that maybe would go over the line stopped happening on the field. Like, the digs about, your history, your background kind of thing would have stopped.
Yeah.
And I think it's not been that bad since, to be honest. I think they've had a lot of mutual respect between the players since that, even if they don't get to play with each other anymore.
Yeah.
But I guess that was a good thing. But obviously, talk us through what happened to stop that and why it came to an end, basically. So what did you think of it?
Well, then obviously quite quickly after
1 year later.
Yeah, basically 1 year later, after obviously players have finally been together, the IPL started, the Mumbai attacks came about, and that was obviously the terror attacks were caused by Pakistanis, and that was just a complete halt to any sort of Pakistani player playing in the IPL, because I don't know, someone high above in the IPL then obviously came out and said that Pakistanis will not be able to play in this league. And now, until this day, Pakistanis still can't play in the IPL. So just as there was a lot of movement forward and steps in the right direction to be a bit more cohesive and combined, that took it multiple steps back. And it obviously comes with some multiple terrorists with that mentality that they didn't want India and Pakistan to get along. Yeah. And this was a complete non-cricket related attack and any sort of meaning,
and this is just the beef between the two countries.
This is exactly what you mean, is that cricket is the bridge to bringing two countries together, and it just takes one other thing
All that progress is just down the drain overnight.
Exactly.
And, you know, I think a question I even ask myself is, well, okay, terrorists attacked. Why can't Pakistani players still play? I get it. I looked into it a bit, and it's, you know, literally security concerns. I probably still don't understand the nuance of it, but just because I don't get it doesn't mean they don't have a point. It is what it is.
But
it just meant
touch and go.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though if the players on either side don't have a problem with it, all it takes is one random lunatic from either side to then do something, and that's completely out of anyone's control, right? So you'd rather just avoid the fixture or the series in general to avoid all the outside rubbish that may may happen.
Like, I did think though, like that approach lets the people who committed the attacks win. Do you know what I mean? Like, they achieved exactly what they wanted.
In danger, bro. Like the charge,
yeah, that's true.
I know what you mean. As in, you let them stop what they probably wanted to.
Yeah,
stop.
They didn't want the relations to get better. They did what they did, and relations got worse since. And India and Pakistan haven't played each other since, so they achieved what they wanted to, which you know. But I get that. That's just me being an idealist.
How they came in, and then obviously, the Taj Hotel was up in flames. Obviously, there was gunmen doing open fire in the streets.
They made many movies about. Even Hollywood made movies about that.
Oh, seriously?
And I know that, like, what happened was crazy, to be honest. Probably not for this podcast, but
exactly. But that's a good way to talk about why Pakistani players don't play in the IPL.
Do you remember any of, like, you know, any of the major ones?
Well, the thing is, one of my things which I was remembering when I was watching the series is, even when I'd like sometimes not be following cricket as much, or for example, hadn't been watching cricket as much compared to when I played it and used to watch it a lot more then, is I would still return and always watch India Pakistan.
100%,
you know what I mean? That's the difference. Is even if I'm not really clued up or I'm not watching cricket at the time,
it's like not watching the Champions League final. Calling yourself a football fan. Like, you don't.
Which is so funny because it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, India Pakistan's on. Oh yeah, of course I'm making time for that. Which is crazy because you then understand the magnitude, as you said, like a Champions League final. It really brings in even an Indian or a Pakistani, even if you're not fully cricket lovers, and even around the world. I'm talking obviously if you're an Indian born and elsewhere, like UK, Canada, obviously US. It really just does have effect of that. That's how deep it is. Like, if you're from an Indian family or Pakistani family, you know about this, and you know you should be watching 100%. It. You have
to. And like I watched both World Cup wins. So for India, 2007 T20.
You tell me yours.
Yeah, 2007 T20 World Cup and the ODI World Cup in 2011. The India-Pakistan games in both of those World Cups were banging.
They're probably both my favourites as well, to be honest.
Yeah. What else is there? There was a recent match, to be fair. The one in Australia where Kohli pulled it out of the bag.
Yeah.
That, like, in 2022, I think, in the... Was it the ODI? No, I think it was the T20 World Cup.
Yeah, but then obviously the Pakistanis have 2017 where they absolutely...
Champions Trophy, exactly. So... for those who don't know, there was a record until very recently in the last 5 years that despite Pakistan winning more head-to-head games overall, they never beat India in a tournament until 2017, where they beat India in the Champions Trophy final. And then later on, they beat us in a World Cup once as well. So that record's been broken. But overall, the World Cup record is, if I was a Pakistan cricket fan, I'd be like, I'd be fuming. Had to have a better team over the years and never beat your biggest rivals when it really matters. Like, that's bad. Our T20 World Cup win just recently in 2024, we beat Pakistan on the way to that as well. The ODI World Cup that was in India, where India won every single game except the final against Australia. Really good wins against Pakistan there as well. So, you know, just any tournament.
But that was also
apart from 2017.
We couldn't get over the line as well. Like,
that broke my heart. That, but to be fair, that was one that I didn't really blame the players for. Like, normally I get a bit fuming. Oh, why didn't he do that? Why didn't he do that in the heat of the moment? But we dominated every other game. And so to do that, like 10 games in a row, everyone was performing. You know, when you look up like stats or look up results on Google, there's a stat section, and you know, in football it's top scorers, top assists. In cricket it's top runs, top wicket takers. India was at the top of it for top 3. So I think Kohli, Sharma, and one other, I forget who, but maybe Surya, I don't remember, were like top 3 bats. And in bowling, it was Bumrah and
Shami, maybe.
Bumrah and Shami both smashing it. So in all the metrics we were winning, we were beating everyone by a massive margin. Bottling it in the final, but
it happened.
Is it bottling it if you win 10 in a row and then lose the 11th?
That is, I feel like it is.
No, do you? Winning that many games in a row in cricket is unprecedented.
No,
I don't do that,
bro. You can't. Like at the end of the day, the most important game you've lost. So
I get it.
I get it. You have to obviously win all the games to get there, but on the other hand, like. Well, I'd rather be.
It's just how I'm getting myself over that loss, Sharmz.
I'd rather be the opposit. I'd rather play bare mediocre.
Well, that's what Australia did, mate. So you might give up your citizenship. But yeah, man, I'd say it's an unreal rivalry, and I do hope that they start playing again against each other properly rather than just in tournaments. Like, you know, who knows? Maybe one day in my lifetime, I'd love to go to Pakistan and watch a game.
Yeah,
I don't know why. I wanted to. I mentioned that actually when I was in India recently. And my family were like, don't do that. Every time you come back to India, they're going to be like, why did you go there? They're going to ask you 10 more questions. Like, yeah. But so, you know, the countries are where they are. The rivalry is where it is at the minute. Makes for good tournament games, but hopefully one day could get a bit better.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Should we call it there?
Yeah, man.
Cool, man.